So, hi everybody. My name is Paula Price. I am a lawyer and certified executive coach and the founder of Uplevel Lawyer Coaching and Uplevel CPD. And I work with lawyers and other professionals, and I help them with transitions, with achieving goals, and really working on a lot of mindset to set themselves up for success. And today we have a 45-minute lunchtime webinar. And what our plan is today is to take a goal, take a transition, take a change that is happening in your practice, and we are going to work on it together using tools that I'm going to share with you. Now, I have to say that today is a somewhat different, I'm taking a somewhat different approach. I really, really want this webinar to be all about you and what you take away from it at the end of our time together. We've got 45 minutes, and I'll explain our agenda in a minute. First, I want to let you know what I'm hoping you achieve from today's webinar. Number one, we are going to help you identify one of the transitions or changes that you're trying to make in your practice or in your personal life and create a goal that you can reach for. The second thing that we're going to do is we are going to examine that goal more closely, and we're going to look at how you need to grow in order to create that goal for yourself. The third thing that we're going to do is we're going to prepare you for setbacks. Anytime that we take on a goal, something that is that brings us out of our comfort zone, we are going to experience challenges and setbacks. And the third tool I'm going to teach you is something to help set you up for those setbacks so that you can approach them with greater confidence, so that you don't get discouraged, and so that you know what to do in the moment. So those are the goals that I'm hoping that you walk away with. Now, I need to tell you that this is a slightly different approach. The webinar that I'm doing today, I'm actually going to unshare my screen in a minute, which means you'll just see me on the screen. And I've done that on purpose. You will be doing the work here, and I don't want to distract you with slides or anything but your own work. And so what you need to participate is a sheet of paper, something to write with, and a change that you want to make in your life. So if you have those three things, you're ready to go. And I'm going to walk you through the tools. And at the end of this, really excited to see what kind of, how you experience this. Now, there is a Q&A function on your toolbar, and I would encourage you to ask questions as we go through this. I've set up the questions so that they will show up on my screen, but not on the screens of others. And I've done that because sometimes participants might feel shy about asking questions. And so I wanted to do it in such a way that you can ask questions without necessarily having to share it publicly. There's also a submit anonymously button on there, I believe. So even I don't necessarily know who's asking the question. And I won't mention names as I'm responding to questions. There's also a chat function. I don't really plan to spend much time on the chat. So anyhow, with that, let's get started. I am going to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so now you will just see me. Hello. Hope this isn't too overwhelming. So on today's menu, we have, it's a 4-course lunch. The first course is, we're going to start with your transition. So we're going to look at what it is in your practice that you're looking to, where you're looking to make changes. The second thing that we're going to do is really the body of our webinar, which is the tools. So we're going to take that transition that you're looking to make, and we're going to take 3 tools and we're going to apply them. The third is dessert, which is a brief Q&A. So we'll have a few minutes for you to submit questions, and I will answer questions for you. And finally, coffee. By that time, you should have your action step ready to go. So that is our agenda for today. Moving into the starter. This is the question that has brought you here, which is, what change or changes are you looking to make right now? And I have had a lot of lawyers ask me very different types of questions. And so I'll give you some examples of what I'm seeing in my practice. And as I go through these, I'd like you to think about the change that you have that you'd like to make yourself. So one of the main or most obvious types of changes that I see are lawyers who are looking to change their job. So it may be that they are in a certain area of practice and they want to move away from that practice area. They're at a firm or an organization. They are interested in looking at a different opportunity. So it may also be that they do not have a position currently, that there has been downsizing. They no longer have the position that they had before the pandemic struck, and they are now looking for new opportunities. So that is something that I think we're seeing quite a bit of. Um, it may be that you're looking to seek out a promotion within your own organization. And so I've spoken with a number of lawyers who have set their sights on a different role within the organization. So that's another transition that you may be looking at. Attracting new work. So maybe it's getting a bit quiet, you're looking to bring on some new clients. So growing in that capacity might be a transition. Some lawyers are looking to start their own practices. So maybe they're working at a large firm and they really feel like this is an opportunity. The world has gone a bit more digital. Maybe there's a new platform, an opportunity to strike out on their own. Or maybe they've been in a partnership and it's not working. And so they're looking for another way to do things. A transition you might also see is maybe you're looking to develop new skills. So for junior lawyers that are looking to climb up the learning curve, maybe there's a certain type of thing. Maybe you want to run your own trial, or you're seeking out more time in court, or maybe you want to, my background is a litigator, but if you're a solicitor, maybe you're looking to do your own closings or whatever the equivalent might be. But you may be looking to expand your skill set, develop more independence and autonomy. These are all transitions that you may be looking to make in your practice. You may be looking to build stronger relationships within your organization, or to develop a higher profile in the legal community at large. It may be that you're looking to have a better sense of time management. So other transitions might be more on the internal side. So it might be that you're looking to develop more confidence in the way that you interact with other lawyers, the lawyers at your firm, opposing counsel. It could be that you are feeling very anxious. We're dealing with this whole pandemic situation. There are a lot of changes. They're no longer all that new, many of those changes, but still there may be circumstances that cause you to feel more anxiety than normal. And so you may be looking at strategies to cope with that and to be more relaxed. It may be that you have relationships with non-professional relationships that you're looking to cultivate or strengthen. It could be your physical health. It may be that you are looking to create better boundaries around your personal time. So there are a number of areas where you may want to make a change. And so for this first part of the webinar, what I would invite you to do is to identify a change that you want to make. So on your sheet of paper, at the top left-hand corner, just write the word change, colon, and write out in one sentence a change that you're looking to make in your practice. So I'll give you a minute to write that out, a change that you would like to make in your practice. Okay, so I am going to assume that everybody has written down a change that they would like to make. I would encourage you to just do one. You may be tempted to write down multiple changes. That is always my inclination. But for the purpose of making this exercise run more smoothly, I would highly recommend one change. And I will most likely circulate a recording of this. So if you wanted to go through it more than once, you could. I thought this would be more interesting if I gave a real life example of something that I'm working on. So I'm going to be using better time management as my area of something that I'd like to focus on. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but for me, the change that I'm looking to make is better time management. So we're going to skip out of the starter phase of our lunch and we're moving now into the main course. So we're going to go through 3 different tools. And the first tool that I'm going to offer to you is a goal setting tool. If you've listened to any of my webinars or followed any of my work, you know I'm pretty obsessed with goals, and I could probably talk about goals all I could probably talk about goals for hours, frankly. And for today, I'm going to limit myself to two types of goals, and you'll see how the two of them play together. So we are going to start with something called a SMART goal. And chances are you've heard of what SMART goals are. And I'm hoping that going through this exercise will help you um, look at that model with more granularity, and that you will be able to take this idea of the thing you want to change and create a very clear and detailed goal for yourself. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to invite you to take your paper again, and you're going to write the acronym SMART going down vertically on the left-hand side of your page. So S-M-A-R-T, and you'll want to give yourself maybe a third of your page to do that, because you'll be writing notes. I did think about sending out a worksheet in advance. I've decided not to do that for this webinar because I want what you produce to be your work. The more that you can connect with what you're producing right now, the better chance I think you have of implementing and connecting with your goals. So don't worry about the format. This is really about getting the ideas down on paper in a way that speaks to you. Something that I often say is that we are each the experts in our own lives. And what I am trying to do here is use these tools to draw out that expertise and to help you create a plan that is actionable and that will get you to where you want to go. So having had the SMART written down on your page, we're going to go through each of the criteria. So I'll just list them first and we'll go through each of them, but SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-related. So we're going to go through each of those in focus, and I am going to draw on my time management example to give you an idea of what that can look like. So if we look at the first step of the SMART goal, it's specific. And the reason that it's important to have a specific goal is because it gives you something tangible to work towards. So in my example, better time management, that could mean any number of things. In my case, the better time management isn't so much that I need to do more or be on time or understand what's on my plate. I have a pretty good grasp of all of that. The challenge that I am having, or that I had or have had over the last several weeks, is a feeling of always being rushed. The challenge is, so in my specific goal, I have looked to answer certain questions, which are, what exactly do I want to accomplish? And what does success look like? So I'll just repeat those questions. What exactly do you want to accomplish? And what does success look like? So for me, using my time management example, success means I do not feel rushed. It means I feel in control and I am not in a reactive state. It means I have time to take care of myself. So those are some criteria that I am working towards in better time management. So for you, go back to your initial change, what that looks like, and break it down into some specific goals. So I'm going to give you a minute to write those out next to your S, which is specific. There is a question, will this recording be available afterwards? I will be sure that you have a copy. I'm not sure if I will distribute it widely, but yes, I will make sure you have a copy, or sorry, a recording of the webinar. Thank you. So now that we've got that specific goal set out, we're going to look at the next question, which is measurable. And so when you look at measurable, the question here is, how will you know when you have achieved your goal? And if you've made your goal specific enough, it will flow fairly neatly. Questions that you can ask yourself when you're deciding whether or not your goal is measurable is, how will you know when you have reached your goal? Is it something that you can measure in that fashion? what needs to happen by when. That is also another measurable way of looking at your goal. So in my goal, measurable, I I purposely put a feeling. I want to feel like I'm not rushed. And feelings are kind of ambiguous in terms of a goal, but I think you can make a feeling goal if you give yourself a way of measuring it. So my first measure is I rate myself as an 8 out of 10 in each of these areas. Those areas being I do not feel rushed and I feel in control. So if that's what you're going for, that might be a way, a self-assessment, rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10. That is one way that you can actually measure something that might seem like somewhat of an amorphous goal. Um, Other ways that I will measure is I say no to activities that don't align with what I want. And I pause here because I'm offering you 3 tools. If you were really going to take a step back and do a more complex analysis of a transition, you would probably want to spend some time thinking about your values. So where all the pieces fit into what is truly important to you. So um, we're not going to get into that today, but that is something that I'd like to flag as a pretty key part of transitions. Other things that I will do that I would be able to measure is I seek out high impact activities that align with what I want. So in my view of, and I let go of control or drop my standards in areas that don't matter, and I schedule downtime. So these are things that I will do in furtherance of my greater goal, which is the time management goal. So if you look at your goal now, I'd like you to spend a minute and write out under the M, measurable, some of the criteria that you can assess that will get you closer to your goal. Okay. This is also a different way for me to present. I'm really experimenting here with a more interactive approach to webinars. So I would love to hear your feedback at the end in terms of how you found this. I'd love to know because I can't see. This is one of the downsides of a webinar is I can't see you. But I would love to hear from you at some point as to whether this strategy is effective to have you do the work. I think we can all relate to being in a more virtual world, and so this is one of the interesting areas that I'm experimenting with is creating connection using Zoom and similar platforms. So, so we've got our specific, our measurable. Next, we want to go to achievable, and so the question here is your goal realistic? Is it something that you can actually do? And for my example, I said, I will sit down at the end of each day and assess how I did in relation to my goal. So when I am planning, because I already have a number of systems in place, when I sit down to do my time planning, I will look at that I look at my week, I will look at the items that I have on my to-do list and be more discerning. Are there things that I can take away? So have a look at your goal and assess whether or not it is achievable, and maybe some steps in there that will help you get there. So for me, again, it was sitting down and self-assessing what can you do along the way to ensure that your goal is achievable. Okay, the next letter of the acronym is the R. So the relevant goal. And here, I would like you to ask yourself, and this is probably, in my view, this is probably the most important question in the SMART goal analysis, which is relevance. So in the relevant, ask yourself this: what about achieving this goal is important to you? I'm going to repeat that. What about achieving this goal is important to you? I can tell you when I did my coach training, this question is probably one of the most important questions that you can ask somebody in a coaching conversation. What is important to you about this goal? And that will bring up all sorts of really great thoughts, reasons, and it's a very powerful question. So absolutely, you'll want to answer this question. And it's probably one of those important because it will drive you. It's what will motivate you when you don't really feel like going ahead with your goal. So um, in my analysis, I said managing my time proactively will allow me to focus on what matters most to me. So I don't want to feel rushed. I want to feel like what I'm working on, the things that I'm doing, the way that I'm spending my time is how I should be spending my time. It's what's in alignment with what I want to do. And it will bring me more joy. So if you've tried to run your practice in a state of constantly feeling rushed and pulled in a million different directions, you will know that it is not a joy-filled practice. I know that it is possible to practice in a way that is more um, where you feel more in control of your time. I know I've experienced that myself, and I've worked with lawyers who have that energy about them, and they are just um, they practice it in a different way. So from a lot of people. So that's the piece that's really important to me. It's that knowing that getting a handle on the time management piece is part of the bigger picture. So I'd invite you to spend a minute at the M and the R, and just write down what is important to you about achieving this goal. Finally, time related. So this is to put some accountability into your goal. When will you have the task complete? What is the first step, and how will you take that step, and how will you stay accountable? These are some questions that you can ask yourself. So in my example, when it came to time related, well, I'm starting today. I'm going to start today, and I already have started today. I've deliberately chosen not to be in a rush. Um, the process for me is ongoing, and by the end of November, I want this new practice to be a habit. So ask yourself what the timeline looks like for you, and what makes sense in the context of your goal. So I'm going to give you just a second to do that, and then we're going to move on to um, the next goal setting tool, so that we're still in the first kind of category of tools. And so we're going to do it now, actually. Now that I'm looking at the time, I want to make sure that we're running on time. I promised 45 minutes, so I'd like to deliver. So this is where it gets a little bit fun. One of the criteria of the SMART goal is achievable. And I will tell you, one of the things that I love about goals is setting goals that are actually probably not achievable. You can call them stretch goals, impossible goals, all sorts of different names. The rationale behind setting a goal like that is this. It's not necessarily that you achieve the goal that matters. That is not necessarily the point. The point of setting a goal that is a stretch goal or an impossible goal or a very far-reaching goal is the person that you become in trying to achieve it. Hal Elrod is an author who wrote The Morning Miracles. He has a quote that is something along those lines. In setting a goal, it's not necessarily whether you reach it, it's who you become in trying to do that. And so when I talk about goals, I will almost certainly talk about this type of goal because I think it is one of the key ways for us to grow. So if you look at your goal, I would invite you to stretch that goal until you start to feel uncomfortable. So in my example, I talked about my specific goal. I don't feel rushed. There's a few things in here that are fairly, I don't have to change anything really, maybe get more organized and more thoughtful. I don't have to change in order to make these goals happen. Where I start to get uncomfortable is I need to start to delegate the tasks that I have outgrown. And that makes me uncomfortable for a few reasons. It means I have to let go of things that I am accustomed to doing. It means I have to give up control. It means I may need to incur a financial cost if it means that I'm bringing people in to do those tasks for me. And it means that I'm taking on an additional role. I have to now instruct somebody else to do something for me. So in my example, the stretch is bringing in additional help to support me so that I can spend more time on the tasks that I haven't outgrown, the ones that will actually help me grow. So look at your goal, your specific goal, and think about what you could add to that goal that makes you feel uncomfortable. You want to feel kind of like a feeling of uneasiness in your stomach when you write that down. That means you're on the right track. So I'll just give you a second to do that. Okay, so we're going to move into the next tool. We've covered a couple of goal setting tools. This next one is a tool I learned when I was doing my coaching program, and I've seen it in various iterations. The idea here is be, do, have. Typically, a lot of us live our lives in a sorry in a so excuse me, sorry. Typically, we approach our lives from the perspective of do, have, be. So a classic example is if I study, do really hard, and I get an A plus, have, then I will be happy, proud, feel accomplished. So the idea is that you have to do the thing, do the work to have the thing, and then you can feel a certain way. You can be a certain way. We're going to flip that all around, and we're going to switch it to the be, do, have model. Now, one area where I've seen this applied is if you look, is in the context of happiness. And there's an author, academic by the name of Sean Achor. He has a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, and he has a TED Talk that is wonderful. I highly recommend it. It's relatively short. And he's got lots of excellent teachings. One of them is that we have traditionally approached happiness as something that we get to have after we've done all the things. So, when I study hard, get the A, then I will be happy. When I work really hard, become partner at my firm, then I will be happy. So we are putting happiness off until the completion of some task. And what the Be Do Have model says is that you actually reverse this. And so you get to be happy, and then you go about and do the things. And there's a lot of different studies that support this. I'm just going to refer to that one. We have heard this, or at least I have heard this in different forms. So this idea of act as if, if you act like you're confident, then you will feel confident and be confident. Fake it till you make it. I mean, these are all almost variations of the same idea, but there is something to that. And so we're going to go into this in a little bit more detail. So take your goal, the work that you've done, and we're going to go back to what you've written in your SMART goal. So in the S category, the things that you want, right? If I go back to my example, I don't want to feel rushed. I want to feel in control of my time. So what we're going to do, sorry, I missed a step, is we're going to write down on our piece of paper. Again, this will be less than a third of your page, I believe, but on the left-hand side, I want you to write be, underneath be, do, and underneath do, have. So you've got be, do, have. Now, in your have section, you've already done that work. Have is, what is your goal? What is the thing that you want? And so you don't have to write that down again, but have that in mind. Because then we're going to go back to the be. So let's imagine that you have that thing. So in my case, I imagine that my time is, I no longer feel rushed. Who do I have to be in that? Who do I have to be to have that goal, to have that have? So look at your own goal, look at yourself, and then ask yourself, who do you need to be to have, or when you have that goal? Imagine you have that goal. Imagine you've achieved it already. How are you in that moment? So in your B, I would like you to write out who that person is. Maybe it's the person that you are already. Maybe it's the person that you need to become. But in that B line, write out who you need to be or what you need to become in order to have that. So in my example, when I feel in control, when I don't feel rushed, I am a person who is confident in her choices. I am a person who has clarity over what matters. I am a person who is exactly where she needs to be at any given time. I am a person that doesn't let guilt or the fear of missing out pull her away from the current task. So that's who I need to be in my example. That's who I need to become. And so in your example, I would invite you to look at your, what is the specific goal and think about who you need to be. And we're going to have a little bit more fun with this. Go to your stretch goal. Look at the stretch goal. So the one that made you feel a bit uncomfortable, right? Who do you need to become? What are the additional pieces that you need in order to become to have that goal? And so if I look at mine, where I think now I need to delegate, this is not just involving me, I'm involving other people in my time management strategy. So that person, in my view, is somebody who places a premium on growth. That is a person who is prepared to let go of the feeling that she should do everything. That person is willing to let go of control. That person is willing to make an investment in herself. And so ask yourself, if you look at your stretch goal, what do you need? Who do you need to be to make that happen? Or when you have that, imagine you have it already. Who are you in that moment? So once you've done that B piece of it, we're going to skip down to the do. And you may already have some do items in your SMART goal. You may have already identified some steps you need to take, but think about it this way as well. Okay, once you have become that person, what does he or she do next? And so think about what activities you would put there and maybe write a couple of those down. So in my example, for example, I might go straight to that delegation piece and make a list of 5 things that I can delegate and pick up the phone or send the email to take 2 of them off my plate. So I'm committing now. I'm going to make that list, 5 items, and I'm going to have 2 of those go somewhere else. I've written down those numbers. Now it will happen. So this exercise is fun because it helps you to identify areas for growth. Right? If there is a gap between who you are now or how you do things now and the person that you want to become, you now know that you need to step into the shoes of sort of the version 2.0 of yourself. So it's quite a powerful exercise that way. One thing I'll just note is that a lot of the work that I do with clients is really about developing new habits, and those habits initially are something that take a lot of effort and thought. It's a very deliberate practice, but over time, once we start committing to a new practice, it becomes who we are. And so that's what can be really powerful about an exercise like this, is that you're stepping into that new space and then the rest, the actions follow. So with that, we're going to turn to the next exercise. And I realize we're 10 minutes. So I'm going to have to, I'll spend about 5 minutes on this and then 5 minutes in Q&A, and the action item will not take long. So I think we're pretty good for time. If you do have questions, I'd invite you to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will look at them in a few minutes. So the third tool is what I call the 50-50. And 50-50 is an amazing tool. I use it all the time, and I've had clients use it, and it's fantastic. When we're sitting here talking about our goals and we're creating all these ideals, it's all rainbows and unicorns, frankly. And the reality is that once you start stepping into action, I can almost guarantee you're going to get resistance. You're going to start doubting yourself. Something is going to go completely wrong. Somebody is going to say something to you that throws you off, and you're going to wonder if any of it is worth it. And um, so, sorry, I just saw a question on the Q&A. I will answer your question. It's just a little distracting. Please send your questions in. I'm sorry, it's me getting used to technology. The point is, you're going to have these things that come in your way and they are going to throw you off unless you are prepared for them. So there's a coach that I follow who says that life, like the human experience, is 50% positive and 50% negative. And I invite you to accept and embrace the idea that you are going to get a mix of both, and that the negative emotions, the setbacks that you have, the failures, I don't believe in failure, but I understand the concept. It's unmet expectations. So all these things that happen that we feel negatively about, these are normal. We can embrace them. We can learn from them. And if you do the work and you continue to do the work, there is actually a point in time where you can change your perspective on negative emotions from one of trying to avoid them altogether to one of actually welcoming them, because it's an opportunity to learn. And so I won't go down that rabbit hole today, but I will offer you a tool that will help set you up so that when the setbacks happen, you're ready to deal with them. So on your piece of paper, I would like you to write out two things. It's basically a T graph. On the left-hand side, write challenge, and on the right-hand side, protocol. So when you start doing things that are different, when you start growing, there are things that are going to happen that are challenging. So I've got three categories. There's probably more, but number one is negative thoughts and feelings that you have about yourself. So I can almost guarantee, I put this one first because it's probably the one that's going to come up first, right? So for example, in my case, if I try to say no to something that I feel like I should be doing, maybe the first thing is, who do you think you are saying no to this opportunity? You should take it. It's likely going to be some sort of a voice that comes out of my own head that is asking me, it's questioning me. So that's one challenge, one category of challenge that you might have as you try to grow. Another potentially negative outcome, or another challenge might be a negative outcome. So for example, if I go and I delegate a task and the person that I delegate it to does it a very different way from how I would do it, then I now need to deal with that, right? I need to figure out how I'm going to respond to that. Am I going to accept it? Am I going to offer different instructions? Like, what is that going to look like? Am I going to do it again and do it myself? And a third might be negative thoughts that somebody else has towards you. So you might make a decision to change. An example that I have in my life is when I am, I have an 8-year-old son, and if I'm late picking him up from his after-school care, I get an earful. And so sometimes I'll find myself rushing through my tasks in anticipation of my son getting mad at me. You probably have something in your life that is the equivalent, right? Maybe it's a boss that you're working with. Maybe it's a difficult person on the other side of a file. You're working in anticipation of some other person who's going to react negatively towards you or aggressively towards you. And so these all fall into the category of the challenges. So I would invite you to write down a couple of challenges that you anticipate having when you step into this new, as you step towards your goal. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving forward because we have 5 minutes. I think we'll be good. So the next piece of it is, let's look at the protocols. When one of these things happens to you, one thing that is really powerful is knowing that you already have a plan, that you have already decided ahead of time how you're going to react in the moment. Um, One thing that is a recurring theme in a lot of the work that I do as a coach is preparing in advance. So there's so many different examples, but let's say it's time management and you want to plan out your days ahead of time. Um, there's there's a lot to be said about the planning that takes place when you are sitting thinking about it. You are using the executive part of your brain to make rational decisions ahead of time versus leaving those decisions to be made in the moment where there's all sorts of things happening, right? So let's take the example of my son, for example. When I go to pick him up and he starts yelling at me, my instinct might be somewhat of a fight or flight reaction where, I get caught up in the moment, I get defensive. There's an emotional component to that. It could be somebody else in your particular practice, right? So then the question becomes, okay, how do I deal with this? And if you've created a plan beforehand, it gives you a lot more control and direction when you are actually in that moment. So, for example, if that happens, any of these challenges that you've identified, what is your protocol? And you can develop a protocol for each of them. But here are some features you might have. Number one is, yes, that's exactly what I expected, right? If you go into your challenge or your transformation, your transition, your change, and you've already decided ahead of time that you are going to fail. There are going to be elements that your expectations are not met. You have not, achieved that thing that you really wanted on the first try. And you know that going into it. When it happens, then you can say to yourself, here it is. I knew this was going to happen. This is part of the process. And that acceptance piece really reduces the amount of churn and mental chatter that you'll experience when you have a setback. And you will have setbacks. If you're reaching far enough, if you're trying to make a change and it's challenging, you will have setbacks. So, number one, accept it. There's nothing wrong. Nothing has gone wrong. In fact, if anything, it's a sign that you are on the right track. So, first is to recognize it, to see it, and to say, hello, I knew you were going to happen. So, once you have that thing, you get to decide what to make it mean. So if you, for example, okay, I'll go back to my son. This wasn't exactly how I had anticipated it, but what does that mean? It means, he's excited that I'm picking him up. Maybe that's all it means. Or it means that I should set my expectations up more clearly ahead of time. There were to give another example, let's say that there's a negative outcome. So in my delegation example, I have asked somebody to do a task and they do it differently. So what do I make that mean? It might mean that if I am going to delegate a task and take something that I have outgrown and give it to somebody else to do, maybe that means that I have to let go of how that thing is done. If it's good enough, it's good enough. And that, I think, is a big transition for a lot of professionals who are used to having things done at their standard. It may be that you have to accept that things are going to be done differently. It may also mean that, and that is growth. So the third piece, so here are some ideas: accept it, decide what to make it mean. And then the third thing is to take something from that. How will you apply the learning going forward? So if you, for example, are delegating, you don't get the result that you want, it may be that you just decide, I'm not going to make that an issue. I'm just going to accept that. Or maybe it means, okay, next time I explain that task, I'm going to explain it in a way that sets out my expectations more clearly. Another piece that I'd like to add to this is to notice when you do have a reaction that is negative. So let's say something happens and you feel uncomfortable about it, I would invite you to look at where that discomfort comes from, because that will often be really telling, and it will give you an opportunity to make more conscientious and deliberate choices. So, going to the delegation example, it makes me uncomfortable. Well, what is it about that? Is it, if it's um, being uncomfortable asking somebody to do something for you and being clear in your instructions. So, what is it about myself that I need to address to have clearer instructions? How do I set expectations? Maybe I now need to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody about how to do it correctly. So, I would invite you, as you have these challenges and as negative emotions or thoughts or feelings come up, to look at them more closely and to figure out what it means and what action you might take in relation to that. So these are the 3 tools. To sum up, we are going to first turn your changes, your transitions into goals. And we used the SMART model and the stretch model to really explore your goals more granularly. And I'm sorry, I realize we're now past the 45-minute mark, so I'll wrap this up. The second tool was the be, do, have. So to become that person first, or to think of who that person is and make decisions from that perspective. And then the third is to accept the 50-50, that you are going to have challenges when you take on a new challenge, a new change. And so we did not have a moment to write out some protocols, but I would encourage you after this webinar to write out some protocols for yourself in terms of the strategies you'll implement when those challenges come up. And I highly recommend forecasting those challenges ahead of time, because it really arms you for when they come up. So we don't have a ton of time for questions. I will answer one of the questions that came in is, do you have programming specifically for incoming articling students? I do. I have a 6-week program that is, it's all about professionalism. It's all about the transition between being in law school and being in a law firm. And so it's really well suited to summer students and articling students. And if you have any questions about that, I highly encourage you to send me a note and I can tell you a bit more about that. Yeah, absolutely. Another question that I had prior to the webinar was a question from a lawyer who was starting his own law firm. And so I hope that some of these tools have helped shed light on some strategies and ideas that you can use in that process. And the nature of how you use these tools will change depending on how big your goal is. So if you're starting an entire new law firm, that is going to involve a much deeper analysis than if you are taking the time management example that I've been using. But these tools are useful in any of those capacities. And so if you have further questions, I'd invite you to follow up with me. And that goes for anybody who's on today's webinar. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out and email me. You'll have my email address already, and I will send you a follow-up with a recording. So absolutely inviting you to contact me there. So the next and final piece actually is in relation to what I had in relation to the action steps. So we have done all the introductory, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But we'd started out with our starter, our introduction, which was your particular change or transition. We've gone through the tools and we've had dessert, the Q&A. Sorry, dessert was very light. And now, but if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them. And then finally, I had promised that by coffee, you would have an action plan. So what I would invite you to do is to review the work that we did. You may want to take all your notes and turn them into something that is usable for you. And look at your action items. So go back to your SMART goal and see the steps that you took, that you set out for yourself. Look at your be, do, have model and look at the do. What are the steps that you would be taking if you had that goal already. And I would invite you now to write down in your very last line to write out action at the bottom of your page and to identify one step that you will take and by when. So I had said in mine, I'm going to identify 5 items in my sort of in my workflow that tasks that I have outgrown, and I am going to delegate 2 of them. And I commit to doing that by next Friday. So there's my commitment. Now I have to do it. That is it for today's webinar. I will add also that if you are working through a transition or you are interested in private coaching, I 100% do that. I work with clients individually. I also have these courses that I'm running. Please feel free to ask me about that as well. And I find that with different clients, different formats work. So if you are interested, we can have a chat about how I might best support you. For some clients, it's more of an ongoing, they check in periodically, working on certain goals. With other clients, we have a very clear goal that we work on, and we set up time frames and do it in a very deliberate and structured way. Over the summer, I was involved in a program where we did a deep dive approach to coaching. So we had a 1.5-hour intro, which was really effective for lawyers who are working with transitions. So we'd have the deep dive and then a shorter follow-up call to really check in. And so some really fruitful discussions and work that came out of that. So if coaching is something that you are interested in, by all means, I invite you to send me a note and we can talk more about that. And yeah, it has just been such a pleasure. I'm so glad that you were able to join me. Thank you. And I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Bye for now.